This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
For over 50 years, Burlington's legacy has been great deals on coats for all weather conditions. So before you're caught unprepared for the winter weather, head to Burlington for name brands, quality items, and surprising fits for every family member. Stock up on coats, sweaters, and accessories before the cold hits, so you can finally stop avoiding the elements and start living comfortably. Warm up at your nearest Burlington location less than 1 mile away. Burlington. Deals, brands, wow.
This past Saturday night, Republicans in New York City were ready to party.
Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. I'm Matthew Alvarez.
And I'm Bobby McNeely.
So ready that they were live streaming their celebration.
Network. The reason why we're here live tonight, the New York Young Republican Club, they're having a gala tonight. They're in New York City.
One of the oldest.
In between ads for the MyPillow guy and fawning accolades for the incoming president, you could watch rising GOP stars gloat. The keynote speaker was Steve Bannon, newly released from prison. He spent a lot of his time calling out the brilliant legal strategy behind Trump's second coming.
I know it's brilliant because George Stephanopoulos is paying $15 million and apologizing.
Just a few hours before Bannon took the stage, ABC News had announced it would be settling a defamation lawsuit Trump had filed against them. And yes, they were paying him millions of dollars and apologizing.
This is a fight for our country and a fight to the end.
A few miles away, NPR's David Folkenflik was also grappling with this legal decision. But his reaction could not have been more different.
Everything about it was a shock. This was filed, something like close to midnight on Friday evening, right? It broke out over the weekend. This was something intended to be buried, and yet with a gaudy price tag like that, you cannot look away.
David was not surprised by the lawsuit itself, to be clear. It alleged that ABC's George Stephanopoulos defamed Donald Trump by insisting he'd been found liable for rape, when in reality, a jury found him liable for sexual abuse. It's a small but meaningful difference.
We have seen this as a strategy in recent years. When you report something people don't like, they say, well, it's untrue and I'll sue them. They can drop the suit later. It doesn't cost that much to file a suit, but it's part of a PR campaign, right? I've been sued twice. All kinds of networks have been having to pay a lot more money for libel and defamation insurance, but just a lot more money in legal fees generally.
But it was the terms of this settlement, David says, that went a step beyond what's come before. Because ABC agreed to pay Trump's legal fees and fund a presidential library that may or may not be built.
Why does ABC News need to burnish Trump's presidential library? Why couldn't that have been a $15 million contribution to a press rights group, right? Like it's the layers of concession seem to reach a degree of surrender.
No wonder Team Trump is reveling in this moment.
They never in a million years thought we'd be back in power.
And if you listen to Steve Bannon, this fight with the press is not going to stop now.
Lock them up and throw away the key.
Do statements like that give you pause?
They don't give me pause. They should be a clear signal that at least rhetorically, the incoming president and those who have been advising him are openly saying that they want to use the courts against the press. FDR wasn't suing people even when he was being attacked. Ronald Reagan would go after and tease or mock the press. Fine. This is a different thing.
Today on the show, how Trump may be trying to silence the press before he even takes office. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's always nice to get more for less. So here's a life hack that can automatically put some extra cash in your pocket. Discover will automatically double all the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. So you could get some money for this holiday season and get more next holiday season. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. Let's talk about this case in particular, the ABC News defamation case. And before we really get into it, I should just acknowledge that I worked for ABC for about a decade. I left well before Trump ran for president in 2016. With that out of the way, tell me about this case. It's all about an interview George Stephanopoulos did with Representative Nancy Mace on This Week, right? What was he saying?
Right. So this was, if we go back to March of this year, Stephanopoulos is hosting for ABC the Sunday morning public affairs show This Week. He has on Nancy Mace. She's a Republican congresswoman from Charleston, South Carolina. She had also talked movingly of her own experience. She said she had been raped as a young woman I believe in her teens. And George Stephanopoulos laser focused in on that pretty much from the outset of this interview, 10-minute interview or so. He goes in and focuses and rhetorically pummels her on the question, how can you support Trump given that he had been found liable by a jury in New York in a civil trial of rape?
It's actually not about shaming you. It's a question about Donald Trump.
No, you are shaming me.
You've endorsed Donald Trump for president.
Right.
Donald Trump has been found liable for rape by a jury. Donald Trump has been found liable for defaming the victim of that rape by a jury. It's been affirmed by a judge.
Now, that's not actually accurate. That jury found Trump liable of sexual abuse, which is effectively a term for sexual assault. But it had been presented with a count in that civil case from the writer E. Jean Carroll of an incident that happened many years ago. And she had accused Trump in the civil trial of rape. And the jury was presented with that count and had not found him to be liable of rape.
Because New York has a very technical definition of rape. And the judge afterwards said, you did not find Trump guilty of rape, but he acknowledged that what Trump did met a common understanding of rape. And actually, in this interview, George Stephanopoulos flashes up a Washington Post headline that explains this, that explains that the judge said this could be considered rape in a common understanding, even though you have found Trump not guilty of rape technically by New York's strict law.
Yeah, and the judge went out of his way, it seemed to me, if you read his ruling, to do so. He wanted to make it very clear, in part because Trump had sued at a certain point his accuser of defamation for saying this, saying, hey, look, it's not as though he wasn't found to have done something that most people would find to be rape. He did, but that's not technically how it's defined under New York state law, right? Be that as it may, Stephanopoulos did not make that distinction. He did not lay that out. He simply said a jury found him liable for rape. That's just not true. It's New York state law. The jury didn't find that. That's something that's relatively easy for him to have done in the moment or for ABC to have cleaned up after the fact.
Did he ever apologize or say, actually, it was a little squishier than this? No.
Not until this week.
What I'm hearing is that George Stephanopoulos certainly dug in on this issue, but that also there was squishiness because of how the judge talked about the charges. And I guess I'm curious, how quickly did Team Trump seize on this interview and say, no, we're going to sue over this?
They moved relatively quickly on this. They filed this, it didn't take a year. He didn't let the statute of limitations almost lapse. He went after it in part because it was a useful tool on the campaign to say, I've sued ABC News over their unfairness to me. Look at the fake news media, right?
Yeah. How far had the case gotten before the settlement this weekend?
Well, this week we were supposed to have sworn depositions, questioning under oath.
The judge had ordered this, right?
Yeah, of both George Stephanopoulos and Donald Trump, the two major antagonists in this Greek drama. And we would have presumably at some point been able to find out some or all of what they had to say. So this is a classic point at which many people settle. Stuff comes out. Any media company that is sued, people get to go through Slack messages and texts and emails, and it's true for everyone. People make jokes. People, there's gallows humor in newsrooms, particularly people with little sleep and tight deadlines and all the things. And I'm sure there were embarrassing things that Disney, the corporate owner of ABC, was able to avoid getting into the public realm as a result of this payment.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed to me looking at the settlement like it helped ABC avoid all this stuff. But other than that, I didn't know what their motivation was for settling, especially for $15 million to a guy who's about to assume the presidency, which is just a weird posture for a news organization.
Yeah, it's seemingly from the outside, it's crazy tunes and it's disturbing at the same time. There are three possible scenarios and possibly more. The scenarios, it seems to me, are there were things that were deeply embarrassing that they just didn't want to come to light. There could have been something that was damning legally. The third thing is that Disney and ABC may have bigger, to their mind, more important agendas than whether or not you stand up for journalistic principles and press rights. ABC, through this insanely large payment, has just essentially wiped the slate clean. And one of the things we know about Trump is he's an extraordinarily transactional figure. And so he probably feels pretty good about ABC right now. He won't look at them as, hey, those guys have harmed me. He'll look at, hey, those guys really paid me. The second element of the third thing is that Disney and potentially ABC itself has a ton of corporate interests that could easily fall in front of regulators who are ultimately appointed or run by Donald Trump over the next 4 years. Disney could want to spin off or absorb more cable or streaming elements to help bolster it to take on Netflix, Apple, and Amazon, right? Just as it did in the first Trump administration by taking over a ton of assets from Fox in Hollywood that should have undergone really strict regulatory review. And Trump's only response to it was to call Rupert Murdoch, who was selling off these things, and say, you're not selling Fox News, are you? And Murdoch said no. And he said, well, then congratulations on the sale. Disney may need to be in the acquiring, merging, or deacquisition business of certain things, and is going to want sign off from regulators. And this may be seen as a cheap investment in, decisions that are worth billions down the line.
Here's something I'm noticing with this settlement. It's something I'm noticing that's not happening, which is that I don't see so far that any ABC News employees have been disciplined in regards to this segment on This Week. But at the same time, I don't see someone like George Stephanopoulos, whose performance is very much in question in this lawsuit. I don't see him resigning in protest. If something wrong had happened here, wouldn't you expect one of these things to be going on?
It's usually not the way TV thinks about talent. That is, and talents in quotes, right? But in their most prominent figures in whom they've invested so much. Stephanopoulos had a reported annual paycheck of north of $20-some million. That's an insane amount of money, too. But it means that they've invested a lot of money. He's hosting or co-hosting 2 shows, Good Morning America, which is their real moneymaker, and This Week. He shares those duties, but nonetheless, he's sort of one of the main faces there for the news division.
So he's too big to fail? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't know. I don't know as we head into another 4 years of Trump if you can 100% expect to see George Stephanopoulos in the same position going forward over time. It doesn't mean necessarily he's at the one purely for fault. I kind of blame bosses for not correcting this the next day or the next week.
Yeah. You spoke to multiple media lawyers about this settlement to get their takes, what they would have done, whether they were as surprised as you were. What did they tell you?
I spoke to 6, and all but one were absolutely flabbergasted by this. There are defenses like substantial truth, which this was substantially true. It was truth adjacent, as we might say in common parlance, right?
Well, and also Trump is a public figure, so the bar is higher for him, right?
Very high bar under the 60-year-old Supreme Court decision for a public official. And Trump is, the most public of officials in the country other than Biden at the moment. So you would think the bar is almost impossibly high. In that decision, I think it's worth noting, it was about an ad that was taken out to criticize a public official in Alabama, a segregationist. And the ad was not perfectly accurate in all of its particulars. And part of the ruling was that, look, we have to allow for a certain imprecision to allow for the kind of rolling, robust public debate that our founders envisioned. Otherwise you could have a tyrant in office that's taking advantage of technicalities to brutalize people trying to hold them accountable or just to critique them.
Yeah. I mean, isn't defending a case like this a media company's job? It's like part of the risk you take on.
Yeah, you don't want media outlets to be defensive when they get things wrong. You want them to acknowledge it. But the whole point is that, you have to have legal teams that are able to stand up for both the specific instances and to the principles at stake as a way of ensuring that these defenses hold.
Has ABC offered any assurances that this settlement isn't going to change the way it pursues its accountability coverage?
Look, ABC, all that it has publicly said is that it is happy to move past this and that this has been resolved. And I think it's indicative of a desire to be able to keep doing business with Trump, whether journalistically or in business. Again, we don't know what embarrassing things have been buried by the protection of this stuff from any further legal discovery or questioning under oath or the like. But what we do know is that they seem utterly unapologetic for resolving this in a way without a peep of or a head nod toward the concerns of ongoing press freedoms and the importance of holding powerful public figures of whatever stripe accountable. And one of the things we know from the first Trump administration is that his vision of the power of the executive branch is near absolute, as it resides particularly in the president, that a lot of things he did were found even by judges that he appointed and from his own party were to exceed the power of the federal government or the law, and that there was a real stretching of and fracturing of ethical standards, that there was a really significant element of corruption and real questionable amount of business activity by Trump's own immediate family members.
Mm-hmm. Stuff that benefited from a free press.
Stuff that required a free press to really look hard at it and to share it with us, right? There have been a lot of budget cuts at ABC News. There's been a lot of executive turmoil and dysfunction there. And to have their bosses say, well, we're just going to send another $15 million away. Let's assume that doesn't come from the news budget's bottom line, and it comes from insurers mostly and from corporate coffers. Even so, that's a real slap in the face.
When we come back, all the other press lawsuits still to come. This episode is brought to you by Quince. It is great when you can get someone a gift they would not necessarily get for themselves. A little bit of luxury that they don't even know they're missing. For quality gifts at an affordable price, the go-to is Quince. I have some bedding and clothing from Quince, and I really like what they're up to, which is providing these luxurious basics at a reasonable price point. Like I've got this one button-down shirt that is the perfect modern boxy fit. It's in this really cool shade of green. I can wear it to the office or a concert or over a bathing suit. Super soft, super versatile. Quince lets you treat your loved ones and yourself to everyday luxury like that shirt. But it's chilly out here right now, so maybe you're looking for some Christmas sweaters. Quince's Mongolian cashmere starts at $50 for one sweater. which is pretty affordable. For the ultimate gifts, check out their 14-karat gold jewelry. They've also got Italian leather handbags. Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, they pass savings on to you. And they use premium fabrics and finishes for luxury feel in every piece. Gift luxury this holiday season without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/whatnext for 365-day returns, plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/whatnext to get free shipping and a 365-day return policy. Quince.com/whatnext.
This episode is brought to you by NRDC. We all know by now that Trump was elected president, and one thing is paramount. We must fight for our planet. The Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC, is fighting in and out of court to protect the environment, public health, and climate progress from Trump's Project 2025 agenda. NRDC has done it before, and with your help, they'll do it again. During Trump's first term, NRDC filed over 150 lawsuits against Trump's administration and won almost 90% of resolved cases. And this time, they're ready to fight even harder. Despite Trump and his allies' best efforts to pull society backward again, NRDC will work every day to not let them stand in the way of progress. Your support is critical right now. NRDC is not giving up, and with you, they can safeguard our planet for future generations. Donate now at nrdc.org/podcast. All gifts matched for a limited time.
On Monday, just a few days after the ABC News settlement was announced, President-elect Trump gave a press conference where he addressed the corrupt media and touted the lawsuits he had been pursuing, or planning to pursue, against news organizations.
And you need a fair press. And the press says, no, I see others. I have a few others that I'm doing. I'm going to, as an example, I'm doing this not because I want to. I'm doing this because I feel I have an obligation to. I'm going to be bringing one against.
I listened to what Trump had to say at the press conference. He sounded buoyant, ebullient, but also, wistful and regretful. I'm so sorry that I'm the one that has to hold the press accountable. Notice the inversion of roles, right?
And so I think we're doing well. And I feel I have to do this. I shouldn't really be the one to do it. It should have been Justice Department or somebody else, but I have to do it. It costs a lot of money to do it, but we have to straighten out the press. Our press is very corrupt. Almost as corrupt as our elections.
I'm so glad you said that, because that's something that struck me too. The fact that he's like, I have to do this. I have to take this on for the American people. It was an interesting phrasing.
Yeah. And, he said, I have to do this to make them fair. The government should have done this. The Justice Department should have done this for me. This is expensive, but, if they're not going to, I'll do it. Well, he's named Kash Patel to be his next FBI director. And, Patel has made it very clear he wants to put journalists and editors and publishers in jail who publish confidential government secrets as defined by, probably Trump and Kash Patel.
Yeah. What struck me is how many lawsuits Trump has filed against media companies or is planning to file.
Right. CBS, the Washington Post, the New York Times.
Pulitzer Prizes.
The people who run the Pulitzer Prizes, right? He challenged their awarding Pulitzers to some of the reporting about the ties between figures associated with Trump in the 2016 race and the Russians, and the extent to which the Russians got involved in trying to disrupt the 2016 elections. And Trump is trying to call it all a hoax.
And I want them to take back the Pulitzer Prizes and pay big damages. And I think we're doing very well on that one. They have no excuse for it. They gave a Pulitzer Prize to writers that got Russia wrong. And
you can argue that he's not going after the hardest hitting accountability reporting itself. He's going after CBS for what? He's going after CBS for how they edited and chopped up an interview with Kamala Harris and whether or not they put out a transcript on it. And he's doing it under a question of marketing, like deceptive marketing, basically, in Texas.
Yeah, because 60 Minutes did an interview with Kamala Harris. They released a longer version of her answer to a question on their Sunday morning show.
And slightly different version than they did on 60 Minutes itself. But, it's like, that's not a legal claim. That's not defamation.
The day after this press conference, Trump announced another lawsuit. this time against the Des Moines Register and pollster Ann Selzer, who released a poll a few days before the election that showed Trump losing the state of Iowa. Trump ultimately won that state by 13 points, but he's now claiming the poll was consumer fraud.
Trump is, intent on hobbling, intimidating, mocking, and discrediting the press so that when they, as he has said in other circumstances, when they do critical reporting on him that shows ways in which he's acted that might be inappropriate, unethical, shameful, or illegal, he will be able to say, well, we already know that the press lies. We already know that this network lies, or that the media lies more generally. He won in Iowa running away. I don't know how he can claim this poll interfered with the election, because it seemed to have no relationship to what actually played out whatsoever.
Yeah.
And doing this is a way of intimidating the press. How do we know this stuff works? Well, I got to say, I don't have any secret emails showing this to be the case, but it's hard to remove this from the context of what we've seen from other news outlets, right? We've been reporting in recent weeks about the decision by the billionaire entrepreneur owners of the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post, Patrick Soon-Shiong and Jeff Bezos, deciding to kill the editorial endorsements of Trump's opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris, just days before the election itself.
Well, and just today, there was reporting from Oliver Darcy that at the LA Times, the opinion section's been told by their owner they can't run anti-Trump editorials unless they have some kind of both sides thing happening. And it's holding up their op-ed pages, which is even further than just straight up not publishing an endorsement.
It's tying them into pretzels, but you're seeing between those and the congratulatory tweets and statements made by a number of media and for that matter, social media chiefs, a desire to be on a strong footing with Trump is more important than what nominally you stand for. You haven't seen that from, A.G. Sulzberger at the Times, or our chiefs at NPR, or Mike Bloomberg, who actually endorsed Harris shortly after the Post was revealed to decline to do so. But, looking at what ABC is doing is sort of seems to fit into that pattern. You don't see people standing up for the idea that the press is independent. It seems to be a political actor at the moment, subject to the pressures of the powerful.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Please.
Litigation has played a role in changing how some industries work. And I say that because Donald Trump is certainly positioning these lawsuits as a way to fix the media. Like, someone has to do something about what's happening at the media, and I'm going to do it with these lawsuits. And if I look at, for instance, safety in automobiles, lawsuits played a role in making cars safer. Why should we not be thinking about the press in that framework?
I love that you've asked this question, because from the moment you started past the words devil's advocate, I was like, all right, is Donald Trump the Ralph Nader of the populist hard right?
Exactly.
When it comes to the press, right? And, the difference is Trump is doing this purely in his self-interest. Trump is not taking up the cause for somebody else. Trump is not even taking up the cause, certainly, for somebody else who may not agree with him. It's all transactional. So that's a very different agenda. Now, we have seen changes. If you look at the lawsuit, particularly from Dominion against Fox and Smartmatic against some of the smaller right-wing outlets over the lies about election fraud, the 2020 race, those have changed the way those different outlets have treated that issue.
In good ways, more truthful ways.
Yeah. Yes. They've withdrawn some of the worst statements and they've softened the way they approach it. So this, to me, Trump is presenting himself that way because it has the echoes. If you drain it of the meaning, it has the echoes of being a populist. I'm on your side. I'm fighting these big major media corporations for you. Look how unfair they are. They're so unfair, they agreed voluntarily to pay me $15 million. In the Dominion case, the fact that the $787.5 million settlement from the Murdochs and Fox to Dominion was announced was part of the punishment for Fox. In this case, $15 million may sound a lot less than, almost 800 million, but it's a ton of money for a settlement. And it's a ton of money to be announced publicly.
Well, especially with a media organization that's, laid people off over the years. $15 million is a lot of journalist jobs.
It's a lot of money. And it's just hard. I was told when I was a very junior political reporter in Washington by a very smart bureau chief for the Baltimore Sun. He said, don't think that media leaders can't look at the polls and see which way the political winds are blowing. Just never forget that. That was before I ever wrote my first story on media in the late 90s. And man, do I think about that a lot. This is an accommodation to power for sure. Either burying something shameful we just don't know about, they're not willing to acknowledge, without, as you point out rightly, any publicly understood repercussions for the journalists who might be involved, or the executives or whomever, or simply just an acquiescence to power in a stance that shouldn't fundamentally be part of a news outlet's DNA or a philosophy.
Dave, I'm really grateful for your time and your reporting. Thanks for coming on the show.
Always an honor to hear your voice. Thank you, Mary Harris, for what you do.
David Folkenflik is a media correspondent at NPR. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. We are led by Alicia Montgomery. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky if you'd like. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.